Hi, folks. Welcome to the Caniac Chronicles. I'm your chronicler, Andy, and this is episode 13. Today's probably going to be a little bit shorter of an episode than normal. Not a whole lot really has changed over the last week for Carolina. They did end up losing their first game of the season, fell to Vegas the other night 4-1, and for the agenda today, I'm kind of gonna be addressing some of basically the current roster health, roster status, the health status of the roster. There we go. Couple of big names that are down right now that they're not playing with. Even a name or two that has been out for the whole season so far that we haven't even seen yet. There's definitely a lot of conversation going on around that. Particular note for the Hurricanes these days. Local broadcasts, national broadcasts, everybody's talking about it. But I definitely want to kind of provide a different sort of take on that today. And then we'll get into a little bit of a review. Like I said, not much has changed, but we'll take a look at the games that have, progressed since the last episode. And just a quick little plug too at the end on some minor league hockey to check out at some point. So without further ado, let's get into it. Obviously, the elephant in the room, if you will, Jacob Slavin has not participated on any of the games for the road trip here. I don't believe he traveled with them at all out to California for that first game against San Jose. And then in the middle of the 6-game road trip, we do see Shane Gostisbehere go down during the Los Angeles Kings game on this past Saturday. And he ended up flying home back to Raleigh that next day. So he has removed, I don't know if he's removed himself or if, the Canes management has removed him, but, either way, he's not in the picture anymore. He's resting up back here at home. He's probably spending a lot of time with Slavin, and, as they both rehab each other, as they each rehab one another. But overall, kind of what I want to say on this topic, and obviously we also have Pyotr Kochetkov, who hasn't seen a single minute of playtime yet. In fact, I don't even think he's dressed yet once, so he hasn't even been included in any game roster whatsoever. So, like I was saying at the opening, it's a topic that is discussed heavily at both the local level of broadcasting as well as the national level, I feel. And to be honest, the reason why I wanted to bring this up today is because I've really felt like it's been something that has been getting blown out of proportion lately. This isn't a season-ending situation. As far as I know, this isn't a season-ending situation with any of these guys. For the most part, I would say, aside from Kochetkov, again, there's not a whole lot that we know in terms of specifics about what is going on with these players and their health. So, for all we know, Kochetkov could be dealing with the rehab of tearing something or spraining something. I don't know what it is with him, but in terms of the conversation that does come from the locker room, particularly from Rod Brendamore, the coach, doesn't really strike me as something to be too concerned about here as a fan. While in my opinion, and I think the league has been coming around to it lately, the number one overall defenseman, Jacob Slavin, is not being played much up until this point in the season. He managed to get about a game and a half under his belt before he left a game and didn't return, and like I said, didn't go on the 6-game road trip with the team. And then the feedback on Gostisbehere was kind of that he tweaked something or something just didn't quite feel right for him coming out of that shift in LA. And for the most part, it's not labeled like this, but from my vantage point, I do feel like these are pretty clear preventative measure moves. We're still very early in the season. We're only 5 games in. That's not even really 10% of the season yet. There's still a very large chunk to go. And then after that, as you all know, if you've been watching hockey for, even more than at least one full season, you're going to know that the playoffs begin a whole new gambit, a whole new league, and a whole new type of game that's played. And it's a much more physical game, and it's a much more demanding game, both mentally and physically in that capacity. And you really want your players at their full capacity going into that postseason. And this team, the core of this team, which would include Jacob Slavin, some of the forwards like Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, Jordan Stahl, Martinook, Jarvis is now getting up there, I would say, and even Jesperi Kotkaniemi. All those guys, for the most part, most of them have been here for all of the playoffs since Rod Brind'Amour has taken over. Some of them have been here for the majority, at least. And the Canes go deep in those playoff runs. And, having that extra, it's essentially an extra season condensed into about 2 to 2.5 months of time, depending on how long the series each of the rounds of series go or last. And it's something that we see with defending champions. Dynasties in hockey don't last forever. We saw it with Chicago in the early to mid 2010s. We saw it as well with LA at around the same time period. We have begun to see it with Tampa Bay. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, we start to see it with Florida. First instincts on the regular season, maybe we are seeing a little bit of that fatigue, but you're really going to see it come postseason. We'll see who can overcome that fatigue and who can't. But my point being, this team has been through a lot, and even Jalen Chatfield, I failed to mention him. He's been here, part of this core, quote unquote, for quite some time now too, and so I'll lump him into that. And that's a significant number of players who have had a significant number of minutes played over the last 5 to 8 years, depending on how long you've been with us. Not to mention, their careers at large. And this team is a very well-conditioned team. This team puts in a lot of work toward that ultimate goal. But for those reasons, I guess I'm just kind of talking in circles here, and then I'll just ultimately come to my point, which is that if this team can get rest, if members of this team, if members of the core can get rest and, be that much more energized for this week of the season next week of the season or the week after that, or, whatever week they end up clearing doctor's orders or team orders or trainer orders, whatever it is, and coming back to the league to start playing in games again, the more rested, the more, to their full capabilities they will be come postseason. And so for those reasons, I really do believe that the fact that Slavin isn't in the lineup these last few games, now Gostisbehere is off the roster sheet for the previous Vegas game, as well as these final 2 road games in Colorado and Dallas, is I think simply these guys kind of deserve the rest. They're veterans. If they've tweaked something, if they don't feel 100% today, why risk it? If they feel 90%, if they feel 85%, why risk putting them in the crosshairs of going down to 10, 20, or 30% for whatever reason, for whatever injury they might exacerbate. When you can just say, hey, you don't need to worry about it, Jacob. You don't need to worry about it, Shane. Get home, get on a plane, get home, go see your families, rest up, recharge, hit the gym, take some time to yourself, get better, get well, work with the trainers, you have all these resources and time available to you if you're not playing with the team, especially on a road trip like they're on. And they clearly, I almost said they clearly don't need it. Ultimately they do need these guys back. Don't get me wrong. But if you look at the standings, if you look at the stat lines these days, it's not the biggest deal that these two players and Kochetkov and net are not available to this team. We've been saying it all preseason and for the first episode since the season has started, and we're probably going to be saying it all year long. But the depth is here. The depth is with this team. Tulski has done a phenomenal job, really, of pulling together enough of those pieces to call this team a depth hockey team. And again, that's something that I want to stress for newer fans to this team. Has not always been here. It has not always been a luxury that we have been able to experience as Canes fans. We've had some pretty poverty years, going back from that Eastern Conference Final loss in 2009 to the eventual Stanley Cup champions. All the way till the 2000, the game with Peter Mrazek, the we're in, yes. It's been a journey, and you can't take everything for granted that this team has built up until now. And I think one of the lasting symbols of that is Jordan Staal, right? Jordan Staal came to this team in, I want to say 2011, 2012. I think I was home from college, so it had to have been in at least 2011 or 2012. He, shortly after that, his brother ended up leaving the team. He ends up becoming the captain of the team. He sticks with this team through the tough years, through the drama years, the years of having Hannafin and Haula, Elias Lindholm, the Jeff Skinner years. Jordan Staal has been here for all of that, and I think he is the lasting symbol that there's nothing on this team that we should be taking for granted these days. And between him and the precautionary, in my opinion, the precautionary injury reactions that the team has with these players and is allowing them the opportunity now to take that break. We're not in those years where we need guys to step up and go beyond the pain of an injury or the threat or risk of an injury to their career or their season or even just their next game. We don't need them to battle through that stuff and face that battle for us anymore. Like I said, Tulski has done a fantastic job of bringing the right pieces to the puzzle and bringing some of the best pieces to the puzzle. And so, yeah, the Vegas, who knows? The Vegas game might have gone a different way, and it would have been great to see this team, still the only team undefeated in the league. But at the same time, who cares if we lose to Vegas right now? Who cares? I mean, it's not a big deal. It hasn't crushed our season. We're not knocked out of the playoff berth. And in fact, if you ask me, now's the time when you want those losses to show up in the loss column. Now's the time that you want these players who need the rest to get the rest, right? These next two games against Colorado and Dallas will be challenging. To be honest, at this point in time, I would not expect, or I would not be surprised, if they end up losing the next two games on the road or maybe splitting them. In fact, if they could split them, that would be a huge positive to me. That would be a big W for the team, in my opinion, to come out of these final two road games on a 6-game road trip, splitting them and coming out of the road trip 4-2, overall 6-2. I think that would be phenomenal. But I also, like I said, I'm a realist, and I don't necessarily think that that's how it's going to go. You are missing some big pieces on defense. You're going into, at least Colorado is a powerhouse of an offense now. And Dallas is similar to Vegas. The Canes hung around in that Vegas game for quite a while, and that's because Vegas isn't necessarily the offensive powerhouse that you would see in Colorado or Edmonton. Not so much currently at this point in time in Toronto, but generally in Toronto. You know, they're again, they're not going to be able to play to their full capacity today with those two key defensemen missing. But like we've talked about, the depth that is on this team is there to keep them in games offensively, that their goalie comes through to keep them in. And there is still good players on defense, especially on the first two lines now. And it's good to see, like we were talking about before the season started, this is what you have, all those guys that we saw during the preseason who we had to, we all got upset, or most of us got upset over sending them all back to the minors and wondered why we didn't end up keeping any of them. Well, this is exactly why. Not just the current situation with the NHL team, but also with the AHL affiliates. You have the depth on our roster. You have the depth on the Chicago Wolves roster to be able to call up at any given moment to cover holes. And that's what they're doing. And, it's something that Tripp talks about a lot. You're not going to be able to fill the shoes of Slavin with one guy. You're going to need to fill the shoes with the whole team. And, this could also be a situation in the season. We could look back on this season, knock on wood, this championship season, quote unquote, if we're looking back on it. And we might be watching the documentary on it. And, the coach, excuse me, some of the players, they might, recant in an interview that this week is the exact right choice that this team has made that could, transfer or propel this team into that ultimate run all the way to the end. You never know. The rest that these guys get, the experience that the AHL guys might get, it might come in handy on the latter half of the season when losing to Vegas would actually matter, So I get it's something to be concerned about, especially if some of these guys are your favorite players, but it's the exact right time and place for this to happen this way. The good news is, as far as we know, Shane Gostisbehere is day-to-day. Jacob Slavin, I think, is a little bit more than day-to-day at this point, but he's going to come back. This, like I said, there's no LTIR in place here. We're not getting exorbitant amount of money now to play with between now and the trade deadline, now and the end of season, going into the postseason with a loaded roster that's over cap on paper. But it's not as bad as I think it is, or it's not as bad as I think it's being portrayed. Let me phrase it like that. One other point I do want to bring up is, the struggling Svechnikov, kind of the struggling Ehlers. Ehlers did finally get a point. He did finally manage to tally a point in the game against Vegas on an assist on a secondary assist to an Aho goal to keep both Jarvis and Aho's 6-game point streak alive. So that was a big point for Ehlers. In fact, if you were watching the game, I got the sense just from watching his reaction to the goal, that a pretty large weight was lifted off of his own shoulders getting that first point as a Carolina Hurricane. So maybe that does something for Ehlers. Maybe down the road that does something for Svechnikov. I think there's a little bit more concern to have at this point in time for Svechnikov over anything else. But I still trust the guy. I'm sure he has put himself under a lot of pressure. I feel more than likely the franchise has a lot of pressure on him. The pressure's on all of them. Don't get me wrong, and they all put the pressure on themselves as well. But I do sort of think that Svechnikov might be dealing with more pressure than others, in a sense that I know that doesn't really make sense, but it's just kind of a feel for the guy. He's just having trouble finding the back of the net, finding somebody who can find at the back of the net. He's playing on a lower line than he normally is used to, and he played one of his longest postseasons this past season, and we know his game is best played when he's playing at his most physical style. And because the playoffs aren't here anymore, that is a lot less of a component in his game at this point in time. Because the other thing about Svechnikov is that when he does play that physical game during the regular season, and this is not a slight against him, don't get me wrong. This is more of a issue I have with the zebras out there, the long sleeve zebras. But he's kind of got a target on his back for finding penalties during the regular season when he is playing that heavy power forward physical game. So, I think he's just having a tough start to his season. He's gone through, every player goes through it. He's gone through a slump or two in the past. He's dealt with injuries sprinkled throughout his career, and it's been a decent, another knock on wood, it's been a decent amount of time, I would say, since Svechnikov's last injury, his last, time away from the game for health concerns or health status. But, ultimately, I don't feel like it's anything to be too concerned about, him included, with the injuries that are currently on the team. Again, I necessarily don't expect them to come out with a win between their next two road games. And if that does happen, I do expect them to be shot out of a cannon, essentially, when they return home the following week from now. Anyways, with that, I just want to put some, put another perspective, I guess, on a lot of the conversation that's going on. Especially the national guys like to hype up every little thing that they can to draw more and more emotion out of you as a viewer. But ultimately, I think it's a good sign of the team, to be honest. Overall, the fact that they can bench these guys, they can send these guys home, they can still win games without a guy like Svechnikov and Ehlers, for the most part, finding the stat sheet. The fact that the ship is still rolling and, the business is still executing deals and wheeling and dealing, I'm not at all concerned. I do think it is a very good sign of the franchise, and ultimately I gotta give a lot of kudos and respect to Tulski for for making the acquisitions this offseason, as well as the year before. But a lot of it had to do with what was done this offseason to get this team to this state of comfortability and support for the players who can't necessarily bring either their A game or a healthy game or a healthy status to a game in these first few weeks of the season. And then, so the next topic, we'll get into, the last couple of game reviews, starting with Anaheim. So I got a good buddy out in California, a friend of mine, who's really, really excited about his Anaheim Ducks this season. And, I encourage him. I think he does have a pretty good team. I think Anaheim had a really good offseason. If they do make the playoffs, what was the interview? I heard an interview, or maybe a post-game, maybe an interview. I think it was Tripp. Tripp was on the Spit and Chicklets podcast, and he kind of laid claim that Tulski should be in contention this year for GM of the year. I think Anaheim is a team that could potentially have a GM of the year too, assuming the team makes a pretty good run for the playoffs. I would almost say gets into the playoffs, because they do have a pretty good team, and they moved the big name out of there. They moved Trevor Zegras out, which I'm not tapped into the Anaheim media, but I could definitely see if that was kind of a blemish from in terms of the optics from the fan base or the media scrutiny out there. But all in all, they got Jacob Trouba to come in mid-season. Chris Kreider ended up signing with them. That was a big acquisition. He brings a lot of scoring potential to the team, as well as a lot of leadership qualities and even playoff experience. So, they're looking good. Anaheim is looking pretty good. Ultimately, going into that game, I I'll be honest, I wasn't, too concerned about it myself. Canes do come out pretty comfortably from that game with a 4-1 win, but I do think the scoreboard didn't necessarily give Anaheim the credit that they deserve. That was a game that Freddie Anderson ended up playing a very, very good game. Kind of the comment I said to my friend was, go figure, Freddie Anderson on 4 days rest, what he is used to in his past career as a full-time backup on other teams, plays very well on his return game after the 4 days of resting period. He played very well. Probably one of the best games I've seen him play ever. I would say, but certainly within the last few years. He looked really good that game. He only let in one goal, and it was it wasn't one of those goals that I felt it was totally on him. I felt like there was a lot of traffic in front of him. It might have even been it wasn't a power play goal, but it was a chippy goal. It was a hard fought goal. It was kind of like a Warren Fogle goal, like just dealing and battling in front of the crease, right in front of the crease to find something. So Anaheim, Carolina gets through them with ease, more or less. They improve to 4-0 at that point in the season, and then they move on to face off against LA. LA was a bit more of a battle for sure. They ended up, Canes went up pretty early in that game, and I refrained from texting my California friend that Carolina is going to walk through LA tonight. There was a lot of big goals that night. Jordan Staal scores his 300th career goal in the first 15 seconds. Less than 4 minutes later, he also pots his 301st goal. We have Jesperi Kotkaniemi back in the lineup, and he ends up finding the back of the net. That was really good. I'm really happy that he managed to do that. He had a nice pass from Keandre Miller. It was a stretch pass, coming from his defensive zone out toward the neutral zone. And he caught it in stride, managed to get a great 1-on-0 opportunity with the goalie. And, KK did not miss his opportunity. He did a nice, quick, that motorcycle kick. That kick if you've been a player, if you've ever instituted it in practice or in a game or out on a street hockey or pond, pond hockey game. That move, feels really cool, really fun. But he makes that move, swings it to the backhand, puts it right to the back of the net. Canes go up 3-0 very early into the second period. Shortly after that, Trevor Moore pots one. About a minute later, he pots one. Then it's about 12 minutes before LA finds the back of the net again. And then finally about halfway through the third, LA manages to tie it. And this one, it could have been, to be honest, I guess it could have been avoidable. I think the Canes could have done a better job for the second half of the game. I don't know if folks were tired. If there is a bug going through the locker room these days, that often happens during this road trip. I even think Slavin might be dealing with a cold of some kind. I seem to vaguely remember Rod saying that about him in an interview with Tripp maybe before one of the games started. But nonetheless, who knows what it is? But the bottom line is that the Kings end up tying it with a decent amount of time left in the first. Carolina does lock it down defensively after that point to secure that overtime point in the standings. And then Jarvis and Aho kind of make light work of the overtime. I think it was one of those overtimes where we win the face-off with Staal. He gathers, possession of the puck for us, goes right to the bench, and Aho can come out. And like I said, he was on the ice with Jarvis and Keandre Miller, and the three of them kind of just play keep away until they see a look that they like. And who else but Jarvis with his third game-winning goal of the season. He's running at 50% game-winning goal rate relative to his overall goal total. He's got 6 on the season. 3 of them have won games for us. Jarvis is off to a phenomenal start. Aho continues to sustain his offensive success this season. He's got 2 goals now and I think 4 or 5 assists. So those 2 look fantastic. There's no concern with those 2. Ehlers, I think, is right behind them. He's on the line with them, so it's just inevitable that they end up figuring out how to work him into a passing play and give him, something to boast about, to brag about. Great win on the road, hard-fought win. Definitely a team you want to see them beat and collect those points on, so that was good. And then to me, that kind of, I was kind of expecting the Vegas game to really go the way it did. Carolina, like I said, they hung in there for quite some time. Vegas had some puck luck for sure. I think their first and their third goal were really, really puck luck heavy type goals. And after 2 goals, the Hurricanes do manage to score early into the second period. So that was good to see. Good to see them get on the board quick. That's not something, that's not a characteristic I have seen all too much from this team. But it was really good to see that full line of Aho, Jarvis, and Ehlers connect for the first time there in that game. I think that will be pivotal. If we are going to win either or both of these next 2 games, I would expect to see a lot of success from that Ehlers, Jarvis, Aho line in order to make that happen. But Ivan Barbashev, says otherwise in the third period. About halfway through, he pots an unassisted goal. I think that was on a breakaway of some kind, if I remember correctly, and he blows one by Bussy, and then William Karlsson gets the empty netter to kind of seal the deal with just about 90 seconds left in that game. 4 goals is the most goals that the Canes have let off this year, and I did mention it, the 4th goal there was an empty netter, so in theory, in effect, if you will, Canes haven't let in more than 3 goals in any one game this season. Vegas is a team that's very lively. They're kind of like the combo of Colorado and Dallas. They have that offensive prowess that Colorado has. Mitch Marner is having an unbelievable season. Jack Eichel as well, unbelievable season from him too. I think Eichel's already up to like 16 or 17 points, something like that. And Marner on that William Karlsson goal gets his 8th assist of the season. So Vegas is a tough team to beat, both physically and offensively. Canes gave it a good shot. You can't win them all. And to be honest, it's nice to get that loss out of the way, right? If we won that game, then there's even more pressure the next game to win, stay undefeated, more pressure the next game, and more pressure builds and builds. And who knows what that might do. It's obviously a good thing to go on a streak like that to start the season and not lose out on any points in the standings. But I am glad that the conversation has already ended with the Canes being undefeated, and also even a point streak in the standings has gone out the window with that loss. And I think that's a good thing. That's one thing that maybe will contribute to a good performance against Colorado and or Dallas. We'll see. But anyways, the Canes do end up falling this past Monday to Vegas. The undefeated, the Cinderella season is over. Cash it in, pack up the parade. We're not going to the playoffs now. We're going to be fine. It's going to be, we'll see. We'll see how Carolina reacts to this. The Colorado game is going to be a big deal. A lot of guys on that team that are former Hurricanes, that are good friends, good companions with a lot of the folks on our team. So it's going to be an exciting one. Like I said, if we can manage to split one of these last two road games, I would be more than satisfied with the team. However, I could also see us having to fall for both of them. But then I would expect a roaring return back home. I think over the summer I was kind of predicting an expectation of seeing a 7-3 record at worst in the first 10 games of the season. So, if you do end up losing these two road games, you got to win the next two to satisfy that 7-3 expectation. So we'll see what happens there. And then not lastly, let's take a look at who's next in the, Colorado and Dallas. I keep talking about it, kind of hard to forget. So we've got Colorado and Dallas, that's tomorrow, Thursday, and then Saturday, both evening, night games, whatever you want to call it. Then the Canes hit the road to come back home. They have 2 days off, and then they're hosting Vegas. So immediate revenge, immediate countermeasures, an immediate statement game, really, when you return home. And then you've got what should be a nice walk in the park with the New York Islanders the day before Halloween. And then the following month, we travel up to Boston to play them on the 1st of November and an afternoon game. Come back down to New York the following Tuesday, the 4th, to see them play the Rangers. So, like I said, next week I will be posting a little bit out of schedule. I'll be posting on Monday most likely. So we'll only have the closure of the road series to talk about at that point. But then when I return the following week, I will go back to my regular Wednesday post. And at that point in time, we'll have 3 or 4 games to discuss. Hopefully some other scenarios. Would really love to see like a 3, 4, 5 point night from Aho here. 5 is really wishful thinking. But more than a double point night from Aho would be really beneficial to the bet, obviously. But I think, now's a chance for him to step up as well. Like I said, there's a lot of pressure on this team internally. There's a lot of pressure on the players, all from themselves, in my opinion, and specifically Aho. He and Jarvis have made the expectation clear that the Stanley Cup is, where this team needs to be. Not where they want to be. Everybody wants to be there. But it is where this team needs to be when you factor in, how the last 7 or 8 seasons have gone. So looking forward to their return from the road series. Looking forward to these 2 games, Dallas and Colorado. You never know. We might have some really good hockey to look forward to in these next 2 games. Both of those teams, these last 3 teams on the road, Vegas, Colorado, and Dallas, are all contenders for the Western Conference champions, which would, if we meet our expectations this year and make it to the finals, those would be 3 good candidates that we could end up seeing there and having to face in a 7-game series. So, but yeah, without any further ado, that will be it for today's episode. Do appreciate everybody listening in. Trying to come out with more content for y'all. I have a couple of other ideas that I want to play into the Instagram account, maybe the YouTube account. We'll see. But really excited. I love doing this. It's just, I've been doing it my whole life, and it's fun to now finally share it, put something together, put a project together to be able to share it with the general public, and I do appreciate any and all engagement that comes my way. So, like I said, next week off schedule. I'll be recording Monday night, so expect an early one next week. I will be posting the MP3 of this episode tonight, and then I'll be getting the YouTube video up tomorrow sometime. So take a look for those. I also want to consolidate all the links to the socials into one page. So look for the descriptions of any of the channels you may follow to change and update with that information in the near future. Other than that, folks, have a great rest of your day. Have a good day if it's just now starting. Have a great night if you're just now going to bed. Whatever time of day it is, have a good time of that day. I'm Andy, your chronicler, and go Canes!